Marcus Whitfield had not been invited to his daughter's graduation party. He knew that. He had known it for 3 weeks, ever since the envelope arrived at his apartment with a handwritten note from his ex-wife that said, simply, "Please don't come." He had read the note, set it on the kitchen counter, and opened a bottle of whiskey. That was how most things ended for Marcus these days. He showed up anyway. He told himself he just wanted to see Lily in her dress, just one look from across the yard, nothing dramatic. But he had already been drinking since noon, and when he stumbled through the side gate of his former home and called out her name, every head in the garden turned toward him. He watched his daughter's face change, the brightness draining out of it, the way light leaves a room when someone shuts the curtains. His ex-wife, Sandra, was at his side in seconds. She was calm, which was somehow worse than anger. "Marcus," she said quietly, "you have to leave. I just want to see her. She's my daughter." "She is. And she asked me not to invite you because she knew this might happen." Sandra's voice didn't waver. "Please, do this one thing for her today." He looked past Sandra's shoulder at Lily, who had turned away. She was 17, tall, and she had his eyes. She did not look back at him. He left through the side gate. He walked 4 blocks without any clear direction, then crossed a wide street without looking, and the last thing he saw before everything went dark was the white glare of headlights. He woke up to sunlight cutting through curtains he recognized. His childhood bedroom. The poster of a basketball player on the wall. The wooden desk with the wobbly leg his father had always promised to fix. He sat up slowly, heart hammering, and grabbed his phone off the nightstand. The date read June 14th, 12 years earlier. Marcus sat very still for a long time. He was 22 years old again. He had a hangover from a college graduation party he barely remembered, a business degree he had never once used, and somewhere in the house, his father was probably making coffee and reading the newspaper like nothing unusual had happened, because for him, nothing had. For Marcus, everything had. He walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror for a full minute. Young face. No lines, no redness, no damage. His hands weren't shaking. He looked, in the way that people sometimes say, and never quite mean, like he had his whole life ahead of him. He gripped the edge of the sink. "Don't waste it," he said to his reflection. "Not again." He did not reach for a drink that morning. That was the first choice, and it was harder than it sounds, because the craving was already there, quiet and familiar, like an old friend waiting by the door. He acknowledged it, let it sit, and went downstairs to have breakfast with his father. His father, Robert, was a practical man who had built a small hardware distribution business over 30 years and believed that hard work and common sense were the only tools a person truly needed. He had watched Marcus drift through his 20s with a kind of patient disappointment that never quite hardened into bitterness, and when Marcus sat down at the kitchen table that morning and said, "Dad, I want to start a business and I need a small loan," Robert set down his newspaper and looked at his son carefully. "What kind of business?" he asked. "Delivery logistics," Marcus said. "Local at first, small warehousing, last-mile delivery contracts with online retailers. The industry is about to grow faster than most people realize." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You finished school yesterday." "I know. And you already have a business plan." "I've been thinking about it for a while." That wasn't exactly a lie. He had been thinking about it for 12 years, just not in this body, not in this version of his life. Robert studied him for a long moment. "How much?" "15,000. I'll pay it back with interest." His father picked up his newspaper again, turned a page and said, "I'll give you 10. The other 5 you earn yourself before I write the check." It was the best deal Marcus had ever been offered. He shook his father's hand across the breakfast table, and for the first time in a very long time, or perhaps the first time ever, depending on how you counted, he felt something steady take root inside him. He found a job at a courier company to earn the remaining 5,000. He loaded vans, sorted packages, and studied every inefficiency in the operation, with the focused attention of a man who knew exactly what the industry would look like in a decade, and could see, plainly and specifically, all the ways it was currently failing. He also found a support group. He walked in on a Tuesday evening, sat in a plastic chair in a church basement, and listened to other people talk about the versions of themselves they were trying to leave behind. He didn't share much that first night. But he came back the following Tuesday, and the one after that. There was one night, about 2 months in, when a work deal collapsed, and he drove past 3 bars on the way home. He sat outside the third one in his car for 20 minutes, with his hands on the steering wheel. Then he called his sponsor, a quiet man named Gerald who never once made him feel judged, and they talked until the urge passed. He drove home. He made himself a cup of coffee. He opened his notebook and went back to work. Marcus launched Whitfield Delivery Solutions out of a rented space barely larger than a 2-car garage. He had 1 van, 2 part-time drivers, and a handful of small contracts with local online retailers who were frustrated with slow regional carriers. He undercut the larger companies on price and beat them on reliability, and word spread faster than he expected. The first year was genuinely hard. A warehousing partner backed out 3 months in, leaving him scrambling to reroute contracts and store inventory in the garage of a friend who owed him a favor. He underpaid himself for 6 straight months. There were Friday afternoons when he sat alone in the office after everyone else had gone home, looking at a spreadsheet that didn't quite balance, feeling the old urge rise up in his chest like a tide. He called Gerald. He went to meetings. He kept going. By the end of the second year, he had 15 drivers, a proper warehouse lease, and 3 significant retail contracts. By the end of the third, he had expanded into 2 neighboring states. He promoted a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane, whom he had hired as an operations manager, to COO. She ran the daily business with a precision that freed Marcus to focus on growth, and she pushed back on him hard enough to keep him honest, which he needed more than he sometimes liked to admit. He also hired a man named Patrick, who in Marcus's previous life had been a low-level rival he'd treated badly. In this life, he gave Patrick a fair shot, and Patrick turned out to be the best logistics planner in the building. Sandra was not an easy relationship to rebuild. She was 23 in this timeline, finishing her graduate degree, warm and sharp and understandably wary of the version of Marcus she had only begun to know. They were dating. It was new and careful, and complicated by the fact that Marcus sometimes knew things about her, her small fears, the exact way she needed to be listened to after a hard day, that a person his age had no clear reason to know. He tried not to be strange about it. He tried to simply be present. What he could not do was pretend the emotional patterns weren't still there, the defensiveness when she raised a concern, the way he sometimes shut down instead of talking. He had spent 12 years medicating those habits with alcohol, and removing the alcohol did not remove the habits. He started seeing a therapist, quietly, without making a production of it, and began the slower and less dramatic work of understanding where those patterns came from. "You're different lately," Sandra told him one evening over dinner. She said it carefully, like she wasn't sure if it was a compliment. "I'm trying to be," he said. "What does that mean, exactly?" He put down his fork and looked at her. "It means I've spent a lot of time being someone I didn't want to be, and I'm done with it." "I know that probably sounds like something everyone says." She studied him for a moment. "It does," she said, "but you don't sound like everyone." He wasn't sure he deserved that, but he chose to try to deserve it from then on. The crisis came in Marcus's 4th year of business. A national logistics firm called Verano Freight had been quietly buying up regional carriers across the Midwest, and they wanted Whitfield Delivery Solutions either absorbed into their network or removed from it. Their first move was a buyout offer, generous on the surface, structured in a way that would have made Marcus wealthy and rendered the company invisible within 18 months. Their second move, when he turned it down, was a campaign of undercutting. Artificially low rates offered to his key clients, financed by Verano's national budget, in a way a regional company simply couldn't match indefinitely. 3 of his smaller clients left. A 4th called to say they were considering it. Diane came into his office one morning and closed the door behind her. "Tell me you have something," she said. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He did have something. He had known this moment was coming, not because of any particular memory from his previous life, but because he had watched how large companies moved, and Verano was moving exactly like he had expected. He had spent the last 18 months quietly building infrastructure in a corridor that no regional carrier had properly serviced yet, a cluster of mid-sized towns growing fast because of remote work migration, underserved by every major carrier, and invisible to most logistics planners because the data hadn't caught up to the movement yet. "We don't fight them where they're strong," Marcus said. "We go where they haven't looked." It was not an overnight solution. It took 8 more months of lean operations, creative renegotiating, and more than one late night where the numbers looked genuinely frightening. But the new corridor delivered. The contracts came in. Verano, focused on larger urban markets, didn't bother following. By the end of the 5th year, Whitfield Delivery Solutions operated across 6 states, employed over 200 people, and was debt-free for the first time in its history. Robert Whitfield drove 4 hours to attend the small, quiet celebration Marcus hosted for his staff in the company's largest warehouse. He stood near the back, holding a cup of sparkling cider, watching his son shake hands and thank every person in the room by name. Afterward, he found Marcus by the door. "I owe you 5 times what you paid me back," Robert said. "You don't owe me anything," Marcus told him. "You gave me the chance. That was the whole thing." His father put a hand on his shoulder and didn't say anything else, which was the most Robert Whitfield had ever managed to express about how he felt, and was more than enough. Lily was 5 years old when she decided that her father's warehouse was the most interesting building she had ever seen. He had brought her for a Saturday visit, not knowing quite what to do with a 5-year-old in an office, and she had walked solemnly between the shelving units with her hands clasped behind her back, like a small inspector making notes. She stopped in front of a motorized cart, looked up at Marcus, and said, "Does it go fast?" "Pretty fast," he said. "Can I drive it?" "Absolutely not. When I'm older?" He crouched down to her level. "When you're older and you've learned how machines work, yes." She thought about this seriously. "Okay," she said. "I'll learn." He watched her go back to her inspection of the shelving units and felt something press warmly against the inside of his chest. A feeling he recognized now, one he had spent years numbing and was only beginning to learn how to hold. On the evening of Lily's school talent show, she was 6 now, and performed a 3-minute dramatic reading she had written herself about a cat who wanted to be an astronaut. Marcus sat in the 3rd row between Sandra and his father, and he did not miss a single moment of it. Lily spotted him from the stage and broke into a grin wide enough to reach the back wall, then recovered her composure with the practiced dignity of someone who had been preparing this performance for 2 months, and was not about to let a friendly face derail it. The audience laughed in all the right places. The cat reached the moon. Afterward, at the family dinner Sandra had organized at her parents' house, Marcus sat at the end of the table and looked at the faces around him. Robert, Sandra, Lily carefully arranging her green beans into geometric patterns on her plate, and felt the full, quiet weight of what his life had become. Sandra's mother raised her wine glass. "To Lily," she said. "To Lily," everyone echoed. Marcus raised his glass. It held sparkling water, which he had poured himself without ceremony or announcement, the same way he did every time. He touched it to the glasses nearest him and drank. It was a small gesture. No one noticed it except him, and possibly Gerald, who had told him once, in a church basement on a Tuesday night, that the bravest things people did were almost always invisible to everyone else. Marcus set the glass down. Lily was explaining to her grandfather why cats were scientifically underestimated as candidates for space exploration. Robert was nodding with complete seriousness. Marcus listened and stayed and did not go anywhere at all.